let's perhaps go forward with the second part of this presentation, which is the bulk, the policy-making process of the European Union. So everything that I have shared so far, the work of the institutions, how they function, was to lead you exactly to that point, to make you understand then how laws are made at the European Union level. Looking at the time, I know we will not make it for sure for the exercise, but as I said to John, we will be sharing the Miro board after the training so that you can go and I will share instructions on the exercise and be free to write to us and ask for questions and ask us feedback on the exercise. We'll do it with pleasure. So let's go. Now, at the beginning, I said that the European Union doesn't have a constitution. The European Union has two treaties, which are called the Treaty of the European Union, or the Treaty of Maastricht, right, 1992, and the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, or Treaty of Lisbon, 2009. These are the European Union primary law, which means the law upon which all the rest is funded. As you can see in this pyramid that I made, right, the hierarchy of this means that the treaties are above everything. Then there are international agreements signed, of course, by the European Commission. As we said, the European Commission has the authority, the power given by the member states to negotiate international agreements. And then we have legislative acts, which is what we will be focusing today, and non-legislative. Now, first of all, we need to understand the European Union is competent to act. How do we know that? Simply, we go to the Treaty on the European Union and we read Article 1. Also, that in the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, there are the different competences for which the European Union is responsible. You will see that there are three types of competences. First of all, exclusive competences of the European Union. So competences, areas where only the European Union can make laws. Then there are shared competences. So competences, areas in which both and the member states can legislate. And then there are supporting competences. EU doesn't really have any power, but can just perhaps make some broad laws to try and harmonize the laws at the European Union level. Today, we will be talking about two main instruments, which are regulations and directive. What is the difference? And why these two? Because you will see that whenever there is an act of the European Union, a legislative act, it most likely will be either a regulation or a directive. Now, I have made this, we have made this small diagram for you to help you find the distinction. What's the difference between a regulation and a directive? So, a regulation is binding in its entirety without leaving space to the member states for implementation. What does it mean? It means that I, the European Union, I am making a law. I am not only making the law, but I'm also telling you how you have to transpose that law at the national level. So if I tell you that perhaps you need to have specific centers at the national level because the regulation mandates it, then the member states do not have any other chances. They have to implement at the national level the law as it is, right? Then we have the directives, which is a little bit more of a flexible instrument because the directive says, I, the European Union, I am making this directive. I'm telling you that, I don't know, we should harmonize minimum standards for disability rights at the European Union level. But knowing that the 27 member states are so different in the way they approach the issue, I will let you, Italy, Belgium, France, Germany, Latvia, Bulgaria, whatever, decide how you have to transpose that law into the national framework, which means that you can decide how to attain, how to achieve the results of the law with your own means. So in this case, the European Union, the Commission, will only check for implementation. So we will check whether officially that directive has been transposed to the national law framework, and then we'll monitor implementation. Perhaps national authorities will be obliged to submit reports on implementation every 3, 4, 5 years, perhaps every year, right? But the difference there, it's one, and it's simple. Regulation, I'm telling you what to do and how to do it. Directive, I'm telling you what to do, but you decide how to do it, all right? Decision, you will not see it often. It's not very used, mostly council level. It binds only that entity or that person. Perhaps let's still stay on transposition. Italy has not transposed a certain directive into the national framework. So decision of the Council of the EU, Italy has 3 months to transpose the directive. Otherwise, we will start a procedure against Italy, blah, 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 blah. So remember, most important tools, most important forms of law you will see when working at the European Union level, regulations and directive, which is exactly what we will be working on and discussing during this second part of the session. Just a look at the chat. I see it's very... Okay, that's for the chat. Cool. All right, let's move forward. The main procedure that we will be discussing today is the ordinary legislative procedure. As I have said, when explaining the European Union institutions, specifically the Parliament and the Council of the EU, these are the two co-legislators in the ordinary legislative procedure on equal footing, which mostly cover roughly 95% of all the legislative issues and areas at the European Union level. And we will then briefly discuss about the consent or consultation procedure with just one example that I will be showing you. Now, the ordinary legislative procedure looks something like that. We have 2 slides. Looks quite confusing. For the sake of today, I have just made it granular, yes, but step by step, so that we can go step by step to the procedure and make sure that we do not skip any step of it, right? So from this complicated diagram, right, we go into something simple, which is debt, which means simply, as I said before, the Commission being the only institution that can introduce as the right of initiative on European Union legislation, the Commission will make a proposal. Then this proposal will be given to the European Parliament and the Council of the EU, which will adopt it by co-deciding on the issues. And we will see how. Now, I know that here we didn't see a step 0. It starts directly at step 1, but it's very useful for you to know that there is a step 0. There is something called pre-legislative phase. I said the Commission is the only one which has the power to introduce legislation, right? Which means it's going to be the first institution discussing about a potential proposal. Do you remember the diagram we saw about the Commission? Let's go back perhaps some slides just to show it again, right? We said usually in one of the directorate generals, so in one of the ministries, you will have a certain directorate and a certain unit which will be responsible for drafting a certain law. So actually the proposal starts at the European Commission level. This is why you have to engage and you have to know how it works. So what is this step 0? This step 0, it's none other than all the phases that cover the way the Commission makes proposal. And this usually involves certain predefined steps, although there is some variation. We've seen some variation lately with other forms of lawmaking, such as the omnibus, which we are not going to discuss today. If you've heard of them, if you know what they are, and you would like perhaps to discuss them in a more granular way, let me know and we can discuss this via email. What you need to know is that there is every year a program of the European Commission, which usually comes out around September, October of the year before, which means that this year, 2026, in September or October, the European Commission will publish the program of their activity for 2027. In this program, you will see all the activities that the Commission wants to do in a given year, right? Let's suppose there is a proposal, okay? It starts by the Commission elaborating this proposal. What are compulsory steps for the Commission? So, first of all, the compulsory step is to consult stakeholders and collect expertise, which means that at any given point, which is at the beginning of the incipit really, of any law proposal, you as a citizen will have the chance to have a say in that proposal. So for at least 12 weeks on a portal which is called Have Your Say, we can share all this in the follow-up. You will see all the proposals open for consultation. So you can write, you can have your impact, you can bring in data, you can put files, and then the Commission is going to take all of that into consideration before drafting the proposal. Now, what is important to do? That while doing this, the Commission will be working on an impact assessment, which is a study that will tell the Commission what kind of results can be achieved, with which means, and how much resources it will cost, to understand different possibilities of going about for a law. There's not one way in which you can tackle a problem. There are different ways. So this impact assessment makes it possible for the Commission to understand what's the best way. Importantly, you will find the impact assessment of the Commission in almost every policy proposal that is then transmitted to the European Parliament and the Council of the EU. You will see that it's attached there. Now, in some cases, for very ambitious proposals, very sensitive policy areas, the Commission could start with something called a green paper. What's a green paper? A green paper, it's a 30, 40, 50 pages document where the Commission invites different stakeholders, the public, to discuss a certain given topic. So the scenario might be, we had idea to legislate on passenger rights. Before actually legislating on that, I really want to understand what's going on, what kind of legislation is already in place, if there are any best practice, right? After this green paper, there might be the possibility that the Commission will publish a white paper. Now, keep your eyes open for white papers, because these are much more specific documents that will tell basically the strategy of the Commission and how the Commission will go about that specific file. It will tell you when they will open consultation, who they intend to consult, when they are doing the impact assessment, when they plan to finish the proposal, a lot of useful information. So be sure when you're investigating a policy area to try and see whether there has been some activity, even before. Perhaps there is a white paper issue that you are trying to influence around and you don't know. So keep your eyes open. So, just said, step 0, the Commission takes from their program this cool legislative initiative. They start developing. One thing that I want to say, without spoiling too much, because Alejandro in the afternoon will actually tell you what to do, is that when the proposal is at this stage, under an advocacy point of view, this is the moment where your chances for influence are the highest. This is the moment where you should be bringing facts, data, personal experiences, the work of your organization, because the Commission will be seeking for good and best practices and data to inform the process. So the earlier you step in the process, the better it is. That's why I want to stress again, please, please, please follow the work of the Commission. A lot of the documents are accessible. If some are not accessible, there are ways in which we can ask for them under a freedom for access request. I'm sure these things will pop up in your subsequent trainings, but otherwise also free to happy to follow up with that. So follow the Commission. It's the beginning of everything, and you will have much more chances to have an impact on the file that you want. Now, step one, the Commission does the impact assessment, consultations, write the legislative proposal. This legislative proposal then gets submitted to the Parliament and the Council. Now, what happens there? It happens that the European Parliament will receive the proposal and it will be assigned to one of the relevant committees that we were discussing, right? In the case, for instance, of the European Union Disability Rights Directive, it might go to EMP or to LIBE for civil liberties. So we really need to understand where this proposal is going. How do we know that? We watch the plenary. Even if we don't want to watch the plenary because it lasts 4 hours and it's boring, you can just access the documents of the plenary and you will see that everything is written there. Or you can access the different websites of the parliamentary committees and you will see that the file might be there. What happens then? It happens that the file goes to one of the committees. The committee will then start the work on the file. Important, without overcomplicating, and with an eye on stakeholder mapping. Who are the most important actors at this stage? The most important actors are, first of all, the political group. Why? Because one question that you might have is, okay, the law proposal has been transmitted from the Commission to the Parliament and then to one of the committees. But how do we know who is the person that is managing the work of the file? Is it the committee chair? Not really. Is it the committee coordinator from the political group? Not really. It's a figure called rapporteur. A rapporteur is a person assigned by the political group to lead the work on one specific file. And this is the actor you really need to go towards when the proposal goes to the Parliament. Why? Because the rapporteur will be the first person that will have the chance to put amendments on the Commission proposal. So it means that you have the chance to meet with this person, discuss with this person, bring to this person your issues, the things you discuss, and he or she might then take your word into consideration because he or she is very passionate about the issue and might translate your input into amendments. So actual wording that will be in the final law text. So rapporteur, very important word, please note this down. And also note this down that together with the rapporteur, what did we say? We said that the parliament is composed by political groups, each of them with different ideas, different beliefs. We need a majority at the European Parliament, 50% plus one. So how does the parliament make sure that the proposal passes in plenary with 50% plus one of the votes? Because in a given committee, for any given legislative file, every political group will also assign something called shadow rapporteur. Please note this down, very important word, very important actor. What does it mean? It means that every political group will also have one person which is charged in the relevant committee to bring the perspective of their political group. So let's suppose a file goes to the parliament, it is assigned to European People Party. Rapporteur, European People Party. How does it work? For 1-2 months, this person from the European People Party, the member of the European Parliament, will be meeting people, asking for input, putting his own thoughts and amendment to the proposal. After that, it will be announced in the General Committee meeting that the file is open also for shadow rapporteurs, and the various groups in the format of shadow rapporteur meetings will be meeting with each other. So the shadow rapporteur of Socialists and Democrats, shadow rapporteur of the Greens, shadow rapporteur of the Left, shadow rapporteur of Renew, they all meet together and they all bring the perspective of their groups. What does it mean in practice? In practice, it means that they will be fighting about which words needs to be over the proposal. Why is it important? Why am I stressing this so much? Because these people are the only chance that you have to bring your words into the actual law. If you submit your amendments, your thoughts to the shadow rapporteurs and to the rapporteur, and you make sure that you have consensus among these groups, then you will have your words on the legislative proposal at the European Parliament side. Why? We don't have to forget that I have stressed a couple times already that the EU works much like a bicameral political entity. We also have the Council. So what happens? It happens that at the same time, the proposal is also transmitted to the Council of the European Union. It's transmitted to the presidency, which will then do what? Let's go back with the slides, right? Let's go, because it's easier. Okay, so we said that this was the structure, right? So what happens? It happens that the presidency, assisted by the Secretariat General of the Council, receives the proposal and then gives it to the relevant working group, much like the parliamentary committee. So in this case, for instance, the example that we put in the slide is the Working Party on Employment, Social Policy, Health and Consumer Affairs. What will happen there? It happens that those people called attachés, I have mentioned them, please write them down, will be discussing technicalities of the proposal according to a mandate that their member state has given. So the capital, be it Rome, Paris, Berlin, Stockholm, whatever, gives a mandate to that person to shape the proposal in a certain way. So the same process in a way that you see in the parliament, at the same time, will be also repeated at the council, with the difference that, as I have explained, it will start at the working party level to discuss the technicalities. It will then go to the COREPER level to discuss the more salient issues between the member states until it goes up, 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 and is then voted by the Council of Ministers. At that point, all the member state perspectives have been incorporated. Everybody has the chance to have a deal. The ministers just have to raise their hand and say yes. Okay? So, to sum up, this process will go forward in the European Parliament via the committees and via what we call the shadow rapporteur meetings. Then what happens at the Council of the EU level? It will go first into the working parties level, then at the COREPER level, and then in the Council configuration. Let's suppose that the Council configuration voted yes, the proposal, as we did it. Let's not overlook that. The proposal will have amendments, which means the attachés, the ambassadors will have changed the text of the European Commission. Same thing for the parliament. The rapporteur and shadow rapporteurs, they will have put changes to the text of the commission. So at this point, what happens? At the council level, they say, yes, the text is good, it can go forward. At the European Parliament level, they vote the text in the plenary and they say, yes, this is very good, it's approved. Two texts, different texts, are approved in two different institutions. What do we do now? Well, sorry, I'm just reading the chat. I'm sorry about that, Teresa. John is recording the session, so you will be able to watch the rest of the session afterwards. And for anything, just feel free to email me. I will share my contacts. Thank you for being here. So to come back, we are in a situation in which the European Parliament voted one text. The Council of the European Union voted another text. What do we do? Well, what happens is that in reality, if the Council of the European Union approves the text of the European Parliament, then it's an agreement and the proposal is a law. This never happens. What happens is that once the European Parliament has voted on the text and the text passes in the plenary, it goes to something which is called trialogue negotiations. Note this down, very important. So, to complete this slide first, right? The European Parliament as a first reading, approved. The Council as a first reading, approved. Now, if the European Parliament amends the proposal and the Council approves that amended proposal, as I said, then the proposal is a law. If the Council of the European Union put amendments, so modifications to the proposal of the Parliament, then it should go back to the European Parliament for a second reading. Actually, as I just said, this never happens because of trialogue negotiations. Now, what are trialogue negotiations? This is something which is not foreseen by actually Article 294 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, which is where the ordinary legislative procedure is written. It's not written anywhere. Interinstitutional agreements from the three institutions, Commission, Council, and European Parliament, to do what? Simply to be more efficient. Why? What happens? Of course, if a proposal goes to the European Parliament will put modifications. When a proposal goes to the Council of the EU, the Council of the EU will also put modifications. How much are the chances that the two proposals are the same? None. Actually, none. It's impossible. So by standard procedure, we will end up in a situation in which the Parliament has one document and the Council has one document. What do we do now? We do the procedure back. We go again back to the Parliament for a second reading and same thing to the Council, and we lose more time? No, it would be much of a waste of time. So what do the institutions do? Simply, they talk to each other. The Parliament notifies the Council and the Commission that they have reached a position on the file because the file passed in plenary. What happens then? It happens that enter trialogue negotiations. What are these meetings? These meetings are very informal meetings in which you will find different kind of actors for each of the institutions. You can mark this down. You can come back to me. Usually, on the side of the Council of the European Union, you will have the presidency. So if, for instance, there's a trialogue right now, most likely you will have the Cypriot presidency because Cyprus is holding the presidency. On the side of the European Commission, you will surely have somebody from the Secretariat General plus the relevant unit or directorate, so director of the unit where the proposal was drafted, while on the European Parliament side, you will surely have the rapporteur, the shadow rapporteurs, perhaps also the committee chair. So you have three different delegations. What do they do in these meetings? They discuss and try to find a quick agreement on a compromise text, which means I said A, you said B, why don't we make C? If the Council says yes, then it's a law. Now, I know it looks easy, but just try to understand how many different hundreds of amendments or modifications there can be in any given law anytime. These are very technical meetings which will be discussing hundreds of different amendments and will compromise on the amendments with something called a 4-column document. What is a 4-column document? Please note this down. You will have in one column the proposal of the Commission, original. In another column, you will have the proposal modified by the European Parliament. In a third column, you will have the proposal as modified by the Council of the European Union. In the last column, you will have the text compromised. So, fourth column, this is how we decided to do for the text for this specific article. We can agree on that. Why? Because both the European Parliament and the Council know what is acceptable for the member of the European Parliament if we're talking about the Parliament, and for the member states of the EU if you're talking about the Council. So they know their position, they know how far they can go to reach out to each other and reach an agreement. Why do they do that? First of all, because it's so much faster, so efficient. Before, ordinary legislative procedure files used to last for 2 years. Now they mostly get done in 1 year. We have prepared this small scheme here, which tells you that, for all the proposals aggregated by a given period of 5 years, what's the percentage of file that was solved, agreed at the first reading because of the trialogues. So we can see in 2004, only 28% of those files, they were solved in first reading, while 22% were still going for a third reading. And we will go over the third reading now in the next slides. It's a very lengthy process. We can see this trend decreasing while going forward on time, right? So in 2014, 2019, on 401 ordinary legislative procedure proposals, which means directive or regulations, 89% of them have been approved at first reading. Third reading didn't even come in 5 years. And same thing for 2019, 2024. 415 laws have been approved at first reading exactly because of that system. Now, what happens if there is no agreement? Let's suppose that there is no trialogue and that the Parliament comes back to the Council and say, well, we don't like that. Well, then the proposal of the Council comes back to the European Parliament for a second reading. So the European Parliament will have another chance to look at the Council proposal. And here there are 3 possibilities. Possibility number 1, the European Parliament says, this is unacceptable for us, we are not accepting that. So the proposal is not going forward. Second possibility, the European Parliament says, well, actually, I like what you did in this proposal, so we approve, which is never the case. In that case, though, the proposal will be approved. Case number 3, which is what most likely happens, is that the European Parliament proposes further amendments. If the European Parliament proposes further amendments, then the amended proposal goes to the Council for a second reading. What happens there? It's an institutional ping pong. It's more or less what I just said. The European Council there has different possibilities. 2. First one is to approve all the modifications that the European Parliament has put on the proposal. Again, very unlikely, but in case it happens, good. We have a law in second reading. If the Council rejects the proposal, then there is something called a conciliation committee, which is much more like a trialogue, right? In the conciliation committee, with same number of participants for member of the European Parliament and representatives of the Council, they try to reach an agreement on a text together, much like the 4 columns document that I was explaining, right? What's the difference? The difference is that while with the trialogues, there's still a lot of flexibility and time to discuss because we are still in first reading. For second readings, the timelines are much more compressed. Usually to do this, either the council or the parliament, they have 6 weeks to reply, or 6 weeks to put forward another proposal. 6 weeks is not a lot to converge all those interests. So procedures really accelerate. What does it mean in practical terms? So in terms of advocacy, it means that it's going to be very, very, very difficult for you to have an impact on this file. Because at that point, the parliament, the council, and the commission will most likely be busy in trying to strike a deal among each other, rather than listening to Gabriele that is trying to put reasons into their head. Well, yeah. So, conciliation committee, they go about the proposal together. What happens then? It happens that if there's an agreement, the text is a law, right? On the side of the European Parliament, what will happen? It will happen that it will be examined, the text, the law will be examined in the plenary session. The wording cannot be changed, so no more amendments are possible to be put. The proposal needs to be accepted as it is. If the parliament says no, the proposal falls. No more law. If the parliament and the council approve the text as it is, then the act is adopted. However, if, this text gets forwarded to the council again for another reading, also the council, like the parliament, doesn't have the possibility to change the wording of the proposal, which means that if it rejects this wording and these modifications, the proposal falls. So at this stage of the procedure, the only possibility is that after the conciliation procedure, both the European Parliament and the Council approve the text as it is, as it has been decided. Why? Because you will think it's weird. If they had a conciliation committee and they decided together that this is the text that they want, why will not be approved? Well, because the European Parliament has 720 members, which are not all of them participating in the negotiations, and the Council of the EU has 27 member states, which are not all participating into the negotiations. So perhaps it wasn't possible for either the Parliament or the Council to strike a deal internally to get enough support. And once the proposal goes back the way it has been decided, it is unacceptable by certain political forces or by certain member states. And so the proposal doesn't go forward. Now, as I have explained, this is not the case, at least since 12 years, right? We can see that since 2014, 2019, there has been no third reading. There are instances in which law proposals have been blocked, but for different reasons, and we will go through that now with a different kind of procedure, which is the consent procedure. And I will bring an example which is going to be very useful. Now, before we go over to the consent procedure, are there any questions? John, also mindful of the time, do I have 30 minutes or?
I think if you can compress the last part, we have foreseen the lunch break actually starting now through till 2 o'clock. So if it's we can take us some time from that, but yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, of course, as I said, any follow-up or anything can be just given to me via email.
Thank you.
Thank you. So to make it compressed, consent procedure, we've seen that in the co-legislative procedure or ordinary legislative procedure, the parliament and the council, they legislate together. This is not the case in the consent procedure. What is the parliament's role? Simply needs to give consent. So the pre-legislative phase is much more the same. The European Commission puts forward the proposal, The difference is that then this proposal is only given to the council. Then the council works up the proposal and needs to get the approval of the parliament, which means scenarios possible are two. Scenario number one, the parliament says, no, we don't. Scenario number two, the parliament says, yes, this is actually amazing, please go forward. One thing to say is that in consent procedure, the parliament doesn't have any powers to make modifications to the text. So the parliament needs to adopt the text as it is. Now, this type of consent procedure, as I said, the OLP or ordinary legislative procedure is used in 95% of the cases, which means that consent is used in very few cases. I have mentioned the multi-annual financial framework, but also, so as it happens, it is in our case today that Article 19.1 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union on Anti-Discrimination says that consent procedure is the procedure to legislate on this kind of issues, which means that in your case, for anti-discrimination legislation, you will have to go with the council, so member states. Now, this might be very complicated. And one example that I wanted to bring to you today, because I think it's useful and I'm quite sure that you've heard of that, is the Horizontal Anti-Discrimination Directive. What it is, it tried to align anti-discrimination protections across all the EU, very ambitious because it will cover different areas such as employment, such as healthcare, education, services in general. As I said, this needs to be agreed by the Council. At the beginning, I told you that the Council has a dual vote. 55% of the member states, representing at least 65% of the population of the European Union member states. Well, this is not the only way the Council votes. There is also, for certain issues, a unanimity vote, which means that all the Council member needs to say yes, which is the trouble we will explore with this directive. What happened? It happened that in 2008, the Commission comes with this very ambitious and nice proposal to combat anti-discrimination. European Parliament in 2009 says, yes, this is very amazing. There was a strong cross. We then saw a deadlock in the Council. Some member states blocked the adoption because of member states' interest, or perhaps also discrepancies. We know that there are some member states which exceeds anti-discrimination and protection, such as, for instance, the Netherlands or the Scandinavian countries, while some other are a little bit more attaining minimal results. A country that demand is Hungary, for instance, in this regard, right? So what is the problem? Why wasn't the directive approved? Because member states in the Council, not all of them, said no, we don't. But the proposal is very ambitious and nice. So different Commission presidents have still been bringing the proposal to their program to try and move this deadlock at the Council level, right? What is the issue today? What's the situation? The situation is that the proposal is there. So there's still a proposal. It's still not adopted. And we're still witnessing a lot of equality gaps in the various member states. So this might be very much of interest to you, especially because you act at the national level, because this is an example of how national level advocacy can be helpful to fight for an issue that is very important to you. I have brought a couple more examples of files that you can follow. Again, you will be receiving the slides and you will have the chance to talk to me or Rosina whenever you want. Feel free to send us an email. We thought it would be interesting to bring you the European Social Fund, ESF+. Why? Well, first of all, because it is currently being negotiated in the European Parliament. Second, because after it will be negotiated at the European Parliament, there will be trilogues, as I just said. So you will have the chance to have a say, perhaps, on the European Social Fund Plus at the national level. And because it is the fund for the people, it covers employment, it covers educational skills, it covers anti-discrimination, social inclusion, healthcare, a lot of things. It's a very important fund of the European Union, and it's very important for you to know what's going on with this fund, what's the timeline, who are the main actors around the fund. And again, should you need any help in all of that, we will give you, of course, the template for the exercise, but you're free to discuss this with us. Sorry if I have accelerated. Um, we also wanted to bring you an example of current legislation that is might be of interest to you, and that is actually right now in trialogues. So this piece of law, Protection of Vulnerable Adults Regulation, it was made by the Commission, followed the ITER that I explained, pre-legislative phase, given to the Parliament. Parliament reached a position, which means that now has the mandate to negotiate with the Council, so with the Member States, on the final content of this directive. Why am I bringing it here? Because trialogues will be there soon. If it's something that is of interest to you, we can help you track perhaps some important actor, we can help you track the timeline, and we can help you get in touch with somebody if you want to have a say in that. As I said, the highest chances that you have are usually when the proposal is at the Commission level. But this doesn't mean that you don't have to try also when there are trialogues, especially on such important files like that. So these are three pieces of law that we wanted to bring to you. We will share them. Feel free to use them for your exercise. The idea will be to choose one of these files and map the stakeholders in these files. So map persons that can be of interest to you to influence the files. I will put instructions of how Miro work, and this will be open for you until you want. So feel free to use it also as a personal space of reflection and brainstorming. For now, and I'm sorry if I'm being super long, my last slides, I promise. I know I bombed you with a lot of content. I just wanted to make sure that nothing will be overlooked, because I really appreciate the work that you do. It's very important. It's never enough discussed, and I wanted to give you as many means as possible that could empower you. And I also want to underline again, perhaps for the 10th time, that my time is your time. I'm very much available to discuss with you about anything that might be useful for your work. Feel free to contact me. And I want to leave you with three main takeaways. First of all, if you want to have an impact, you have to know your procedures. And I know sometimes it looks an exaggeration to present them so granular, but trust me when I tell you that it's much more granular than what I have presented. So there's much more to know. Success depends on how much you know, on how much prepared you are. And second, success depends on stakeholders, person of interest. So the second takeaway that I want to leave you with is know who does what. I emphasized at the Commission level, there will be a given unit that will be assigned the proposal. Know who is the person responsible for the file. Know who is the head of unit. Know who is the director, the commissioner, the person in the commissioner's cabinet that is taking care of that. Know each of them. Know what they do. Monitor their social media, whether they are in favor with your issue. This is super, super important. Number three, which is one of the most important, it's all a game of politics, and politics matter. If an issue matters for a member state, then it will become an issue discussed at the European Union level. Sometimes, being only an organization trying to push for issues at the EU level, you will not be listened, because of course there are so many conflicting interests. We saw today that this is the policy making process, and we imagined that it would be just us engaging in this policy making process. This is actually not the case. For any given files, there will be hundreds of different persons that will want to influence that file. So be sure to know not only who are the people that can help you, but also the people that can disrupt your job, that are against you, that do not want the same thing that you do. And also know how politics can help you bring issues forward. National level politicians especially at the municipal level, are a key entry point for parties. It just starts from there. It starts from a municipal councillor that takes your issue because he's very much awake and interested in your issue at the community level, brings it up to the party at the national level, and then goes to the European Union level. So any political stakeholder that you can collect, it's always useful and will always have insider information. I want to thank you again a lot for well, all the attention. I'm sorry if I speak fast. Sorry if I bombed you with information. John, thanks a lot for allowing me to go over with my presentation, and sorry if I stole you some time from your lunch. We will see each other soon, right? In June.
Exactly. Great. Thank you so much. I think it's over 25 years that I've been working with European institutions and these processes, and I learned things new from your presentation today. So I'm sure that for people who are coming into it for the very first time, that this is an awful lot of information, but those slides are extremely useful, and people will be able to take them away. And of course, your openness to be reached out to is really very much appreciated.
Pleasure.